peace must be our goal and our guide. And all that we strive for as a human family, dignity and hope, progress and prosperity, depends on peace. But peace depends on us.
It is ridiculous and it is against the laws of nature that we can have somebody sitting pretty who takes home more money than the credible entrepreneur who is doing actual production of goods and services.
We always say it as it is.
It is only in this country that when a thief is arrested, you hear elders from their tribe saying, "He is our son and he is our thief."
If you are deviant and I call you leader, probably you are already a leader, but you are leading in the wrong direction.
We want to see the role of the youth in the security, governance, and development.
The youth that I meet and work with here, you know, we call them the millennials and X's and Y's, this and that. They don't necessarily want to live like their fathers and grandfathers, do business like their fathers and grandfathers. They're more independent, they're better educated, and they're the ones that are making everything move in this region.
We look at the issues, we talk about issues that impact people's lives in Africa.
The African peoples themselves continue to cheer bad leaders, and because they cheer them on, they continue to be misled.
Let me ask you, doctor, would you rather be somebody who does not enjoy so much freedom but you are rich? Or you'd rather be poor who you are actually imprisoned by the poverty itself?
My goal is not to come here and say, I want the majority ownership, I want to own this, I want to own that, I want to do this. My goal is we all make money and we're all happy, and I help build a big business here.
Punchline is for Africa, with Africa, from Africa.
In the fight against corruption, it has been demonstrated throughout the world that unless you sustain the war, and it is a war, remember that there are individuals not only in Nigeria but throughout the world who suckle from the breasts of corruption. And they are not just about to win themselves off the suckling. They must be forced out of it, and they'll fight back. Because there are individuals, even in government, in all sectors of government, who now take their children to school on the basis of money corruptly acquired. They live in houses that are corruptly acquired. They do everything on the basis of things that are acquired through corruption. So when you want to stop it, they are going to kill you. They are going to ensure that you are neutralized. These are the people that you are fighting against, because these are individuals whose conscience is dead, and they are going to do anything on earth to prevent you. In fact, when one chooses to fight corruption, one must remember that he or she can't be eliminated at all times. And what President Buhari, and indeed any other president in the world, must do is to recruit the population. If the population has been wedded to the idea that corruption is a bad thing, then that is the beginning of the success of that battle. When I see, for example, your former Minister for Petroleum being investigated in the United Kingdom without being a sadist, I'm very happy. Because if you look at the wealth that he is alleged to have accumulated, that is unexplained wealth. Even if he lived for 1,000 years, she would never make that kind of money. James Ibori, who was prosecuted, convicted, and served sentence in the United Kingdom. What lacks in Africa is punishment. Impunity is alive and well in Africa. And we, the electorate, as I say times without number, are in the business of celebrating thieves. We must stop. Yesterday, Barrister Farana said it very well, that we camouflage theft by giving them nice English names: money laundering, fraud, embezzlement, and all those veneers that make them look as if it is some kind of nice game. Let us call these men and women by the right name. They are thieves, stealing on an industrial scale. They are murderers. And once we begin to call them like that, and they have a mark of Cain upon their forehead, and we shun them, has it been done in African countries? Yes, it has been done. And I keep on repeating, in countries such as Tanzania, they are being dealt with. In Rwanda, they are being dealt with. In Mauritius, they are being dealt with. In Botswana, they are being dealt with. Once you begin to deal with them, then the others who may want to behave like them will begin to take the cue. We must, in the nature of things, earn what we earn through the sweat of our brow. That is the only way in which Africa will realize their potential. Many of these individuals who are in positions of leadership in Africa don't want to leave because they are thieves. And they are scared. They are scared that if they left office, they would be prosecuted. And my view is that they should be prosecuted. You know, individuals such as Hissène Habré, who we know what he did, was it in Chad, are a good example to the leadership that impunity will not thrive. Because I've been talking to a friend of mine from the Cameroons who tells me what is happening in their country right now. And other African countries are blind to it. It doesn't even occupy the headlines of the neighboring newspapers of the country's neighbors' newspapers. Yet the Cameroon now should be in the same position as we see the conflict in Catalan in Spain. Yet we are attacking it in page 13 in newspapers in Nigeria, in Liberia, and other countries. The time has come that Africa must learn and realize that the world is not bothered about Africa. The world is only bothered about Africa when they want to take the resources of Africa. Then they bother. They want oil, they bother. And I'm using the word bother in a very deliberate fashion, not in the traditional orthodox fashion. They bother when they want to take our timber. They bother when they want to take our bauxite, when they want to take our cocoa, when they want to take our uranium. But they don't bother about us. They come to our continent without disrespecting the elephant, and they want to preserve the elephant so that they can come and watch the elephant, but they don't care if 100 Africans die. They want to preserve our monkeys. They want to preserve our leopards and our other animals, but they don't care about us. To them, Africa is a zoo of sorts. And until the day that we Africans realize that we are on our own, we are going nowhere. And very soon they are going to shut us out, if they have not shut us out already. We'll not go to the United States of America, we'll not go to Europe, and I'm happy that we are being forced to stay in Africa. Let us stay in Africa and build Africa. I mean, what does Africa lack in terms of resources? What do we lack? If it is solar energy, which continent is capable of producing solar energy to light this continent and the entire earth? If it is hydroelectricity, what can we not generate? If it is minerals, if we wanted to make bombs, if we should, where do they get their uranium from? If it is timber, what don't we have? If it is human resources, we are 2 billion of us, and we are people who have intelligence. And yet we are kept in a constant state of conflict. The Europeans, the French persuading their former colonies that they are more French than they are Yoruba. They are more French than they are Wolofs and Mandinkas. The British persuading us that we are more British than we are Ibibio or Yoruba. And of course, when we find ourselves in that schizophrenic state, then we engage in internal conflict and they sell their arms to us. Tell me, which African country makes guns? None. I think Africans must recognize that bad governance is harmful to their very well-being, not only for the current generation, but generations yet to be born. This is a continent that has always had potential. These are a people that have always had potential. But since we regained our independence from the colonialists, African leaders in many countries have consistently demonstrated that they are not working in the interest of their people. And that is sad, because many of the individuals who occupied positions of leadership are still beholden to the colonial masters. We see former French colonized nations leaders who are beholden to Paris, those who are colonized by Portugal beholden to Lisbon, those who are colonized by Belgium beholden to Brussels, those colonized by the United Kingdom beholden to London, and the single country that was colonized by Spain, Equatorial Guinea, beholden to Madrid. And this is tragic. Of course, currently many African leaders are getting beholden to Beijing, and progressively the United States of America in Washington. The net effect is that the African agenda is being sacrificed to the detriment of the peoples. And we have examples which are live as I speak. The problems in the Cameroon, the problems in Togo, the problems in South Sudan, the problem in Central African Republic, in Mali, in Mauritania. And these are sad things. And the tragic thing is that the African Union appears to be helpless in this situation. Africa has been victimized by systems of government which we do not understand and which are not serving us well. And the time is now to wake up and to begin to find African solutions to African problems. Is it doable? Yes, it is. But we must wake up from our slumber, because those who are in positions of leadership are quite comfortable with the situation as it is. We must have something in the nature of an Arab Spring. The Arab streets woke up and they told their leaders, you are going to do that which is in our best interest. Unfortunately, some of the gains made after the Arab Spring have been clawed back. And that is a lesson for us, that if you regain your independence, you must remain eternally vigilant, because the forces of reaction are very persistent. You know what is amazing about the African Union, which is the immediate successor of the OAU, is that it's beginning to let Africa down. I was amazed about a month ago when Zimbabwean president, whom I respected in his early days as a freedom fighter and as a man of vision and intellect, when he went to the African Union and made a donation of $1 million, and the African Union accepted it, in a situation where the people in Zimbabwe are suffering, where there is almost 80 to 90% unemployment. And the reason why the African Union has become, as you rightly say, a toothless bulldog is because there are no leaders who are true crusaders for the agenda of the African Union in the manner that we had in the early days, when we had Nkrumah, when we had Nyerere, when we had Haile Selassie, when we had Gamal Abdel Nasser. Today, in a very perverted concept of non-interference in the affairs of other nations, and in a perverted understanding of the idea of sovereignty, people are not their brothers and sisters' keepers, so that we know that there is a festering wound in South Sudan, and we are doing nothing about it. We know there is a festering wound in the Cameroons, and we are doing nothing about it. A festering wound in Togo, and we are doing nothing about it. And even when the leaders congregate in Addis Ababa for their annual jamboree, they don't discuss these problems. Right now, I would have thought that there should be an extraordinary session of the African Union to discuss a number of things, to discuss the countries which are in trouble, and I'm mentioning them ad nauseum, to ask the question, what is the problem in the Central African Republic? How can it be resolved? What is the problem in Togo, in Gambia, in the Cameroons, and in many other countries, so that we have African solutions to African problems? Because what we'll see very shortly is that the UN will sit down and send a peacekeeping force And when there is no peace to be kept, and they send peacekeeping forces, when, in a manner of speaking, the horse will have bolted away. So the African Union is very disappointing. When Dr. Mahamat was appointed as the chairman of the commission, I thought that this was a new person that would come with new energy to replace Nkosana and Lamini Zuma. But what I see is lethargy. What I see is lack of enthusiasm. What I see is lack of direction. What I see is continued pain. I was amazed about a month ago, if I'm not wrong, when the international community asked the African Union to nominate a country to sit in the Security Council, and they nominated the Democratic Republic of Congo. How can you possibly nominate the Democratic Republic of Congo, whose president has refused to hold election, whose country is generating refugees, whose government is controlling Kinshasa only in real terms, and where there is conflict everywhere, and where the resources are being taken away by the Chinese, the Malaysians, and the Belgians, and other rogue individuals from Europe and America, and you nominate such a person? You nominate a hyena to sit in an assembly which is judging how goats should be preserved? It is a tragedy of gigantic proportion, and we consistently do this in Africa, and we think is normal. Africa has now normalized the absurd, and we think that sense is what we do, yet it is nonsense. And unfortunately, many of us who are not in positions of influence, our younger generation particularly, think that this does not matter. This matters. If you look at the history of revolutions, it was always the young people. As early as 1908 in Turkey, it is the young people who came up to rise up against the dictatorial regime. We remember even during the Bolshevik Revolution, it was the young people. We remember during the civil rights movement led by Martin Luther King Jr. and Ralph Abernathy, among others, it was young people. In 1968 in France, when there was a problem, initially in 1958 and 1968, it was young people. We remember in Tiananmen Square, it was young people. We remember in Korea in 1908, it was the young people. In South Africa, in the Sharpeville massacre in 1969, it was the young people. In Soweto in 1976, it was the young people. In the Arab world, it's the young people. But our young people in Africa today are imprisoned by Arsenal and Manchester United and Barcelona and Real Madrid, and our young girls are imprisoned by cheap South American soap operas and Beyonce Knowles. How can that be? How can a continent be so accursed that our young people have no sense of our history, no sense of our presence, no sense of our future? No wonder the Chinese are conquering us by the day. And we are wondering. John F. Kennedy said in 1960, a society whose young men and women are in a constant state of slumber will never realize our potential.
A very good morning to you, and thank you for joining us this morning for another edition of Good Morning Africa. My name is Miriam Ogutu, and we are coming to you all the way from Nairobi in Kenya, East Africa. And it could be a good afternoon or an evening, depending on which part of the world you're watching us from this morning. Just let me see the time now. It's 20 minutes past 11 a.m. And yes, Dr. Matanga will be joining me much later, but I'll start in the first hour of the show. And when he comes, we will look at the news that made headlines this week in Africa in regards to politics or any other news that found its way in the headlines. And of course, this week Malawi went to its elections. The results are out, and I have that in the news. I'll read just in a short while. And also just the other day, 4 members of an NGO from Zimbabwe were charged in a court over what the government termed as activities that were meant to, become a problem to the country. And apparently they were training to come back and cause unrest in Zimbabwe. And so they were charged yesterday in a Zimbabwean court. Of course, some civil society challenging that ruling that happened yesterday. And of course, South Africa went to its election about 2 weeks ago, and tomorrow the inauguration of President Ramaphosa for his second term will happen in South Africa. And of course, YT2 yesterday made a lot of headlines. The ESCC officers raided his home early in the morning and got him together with his wife and his daughter. They recorded statements yesterday at the ESCC offices, and of course they were able to be released later on in the day. They had they bailed themselves out, and so anticipatory bail, they got that and they were able to walk free. But of course the investigations over some money that was lost is still continuing, and the Anti-Corruption Commission is handling that this morning. A lot of it's happening in Kenya, and I will look at that just in a short while. Thank you so much. But first of all, I would like us to just take a look at what is making headlines in Africa this morning, and I will just go through the African news, and later on we'll go through it, and if there's anything else you think I've left out, some information that could be useful for the rest of our viewers, please feel very free to share on our platform, and I will read it and share it with the rest of everybody else out there. So good morning, and we start with Malawi, where Malawi's scandal-hit President Peter Mutharika is leading his rivals after the counting of 75% of votes in Tuesday's fiercely contested election. Partial results released by the Electoral Commission show the 78-year-old Mr. Mutharika has so far obtained 40% of votes cast, compared with the 35% of main opposition leader Lazarus Chakwera and the 18% of Vice President Saulos Chilima. This is according to the partial results that have been released by the Malawian Electoral Commission. And of course, Mr. Chakwera warned on Wednesday that any attempts to rig the poll, there were attempts to rig the poll, saying counting by his Malawian Congress Party MCP puts him in the lead. Malawi has a winner-takes-all system, and of course, whatever the results, there will be no runoff. And we go to Sudan, where Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman has held talks with the deputy head of Sudan's Transitional Military Council, General Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo, in Jeddah. The state-owned Saudi press agency have reported the talks focused on bilateral cooperation between the two sisterly countries, the agency quoted. Now, Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates have promised $3 billion in aid to Sudan, throwing a lifeline to the junta, which overthrew President Omar al-Bashir on April 11th. A journalist closely following the talks in Sudan said the coalition had offered the TMC leader Abdul Fattah al-Burhan the role of leader of the sovereign body that was to lead the 3-year transition. Remember, right now talks have been there are not talks going on right now between the military and the protesters, and but the TMC rejection was on the grounds that the coalition wanted a civilian, Buran, to be a leader, in which case he was expected to retire from the army in order to hold the post. And neither the coalition or the TMC have confirmed the report. So that is the latest in regards to the talks that has been happening in Sudan. And we move to Libya, where rockets have struck a luxury hotel in Libya's capital, Tripoli. Reuters, a news agency, have reported. The agency says Libya's internationally backed government believes that the renegade General Khalifa Haftar's forces were responsible for the assault. A picture showing a room destroyed at the Rixos Hotel, where legislators opposed to the general meeting, were published by the Interior Ministry, says the Reuters. Haftar's troops have been attempting to seize Tripoli since early April, causing a massive humanitarian crisis. We go to Uganda, where the Ugandan police have arrested a 25-year-old British man and 2 Ugandans for allegedly taking part in a miracle cure scam. Now, Sam Little, Samuel Albert, and Samula Tadeop were arrested early on Thursday morning in the town of Fort Portal in western Uganda. They are accused of giving Ugandans a chemical made from chlorine dioxide, an industrial bleach, calling it mineral miracle solution, and saying it cures diseases like cancer and malaria. And in Zimbabwe, Dumisa Dabengwa, a Zimbabwean politician and a former spy chief for freedom fighters in the war against the white minority rule, has died at the age of 79. Nicknamed the Black Russian as he had trained in the then Soviet Union, Dabengwa died in Kenya on his return from India, where he had gone for medical treatment, according to New Zimbabwe News site. He was a member of the ZAPU, one of the 2 groups that fought for independence. Robert Mugabe's son went on to win Zimbabwe's first election in 1980, and not long afterwards, his government charged Dabengwa with treason after the discovery of an armed cache. Mr. Mugabe, then Prime Minister, accused ZAPU leaders for planning a revolt. And in Central Africa Republic, the authorities in the Central Africa Republic have issued a warning to a militia suspected of killing at least 34 villagers earlier this week. The 3-year group, which represents the Fulani people, has been given 72 hours to give up those suspected of carrying out the attack, which is said to have been in retaliation for the killing of a person from the Fulani community. The United Nations is sending patrols to secure the area. The 3-year militia is one of the 14 groups which signed a peace deal earlier this year, which now appears to be unraveling. We move to Rwanda, where Calixte Nsabimana Sankara, the captured spokesperson for the rebel group of the National Liberation Front, FLN, has admitted terrorism charges before a court in the country's capital, Kigali, yesterday. Mr. Nsabimana was arrested last month in Comoros and was secretly handed to Rwandan authorities. He was charged with multiple criminal counts relating to terrorism, including starting an illegal militia and cooperating with foreign states in an attempt to topple the Rwandan government. Mr. Nsabimana had previously declared war on the Rwandan government and admitted FLN responsibility for last year's deadly attacks in southwestern Rwanda. And in Uganda, city councillors in Uganda's capital, Kampala, have made it a criminal offense to give money or food to street children. Violators of this new law could face up to 6 months in jail or a fine of $11 United States. The aim of the law is to curb the commercial and sexual exploitation of children. Kampala's Mayor Erias Lukwago says the ban will also penalize traffickers, agents, and parents of the children found begging or selling items on the streets. And still in Uganda, Uganda's High Court on Thursday blocked a government's bid to suspend dozens of top journalists on the ground their coverage of the arrest of pop star Mr. Bobi Wine had endangered national security. The Uganda Communication Commission earlier this month called for 13 radio and TV stations to suspend their news editors, producers, and heads of programming over their coverage of the latest detention of the popular rapper and a politician. 2 activists petitioned the court on behalf of the Ugandan Journalists Association to have the order struck down. And in Tanzania, opposition parties in the country are demanding electoral reforms ahead of local elections in October and presidential polls next year. Parties including CCK, NLD, NCCR, Mageuzi, Chadema, and ACT Wazalendo, among others, have formed a coalition calling for the creation of an independent electoral commission. And in the Democratic Republic of Congo, authorities said on Thursday they had detained 25 people in a probe into a massacre in a remote northwest region last December that left hundreds dead. According to the United Nations, 535 people, including women and children, were slaughtered between December 16th and 17th in 3 villages in Yumbi, a territory about 300 kilometers north of Kinshasa. And in Nigeria, the chairman and chief executive officer of the Nigerians in Diaspora Commission have accused Ethiopian Air and Egypt Air of operating drug cartels in Nigeria, following the framing of several people who were arrested and subsequently released on allegations of drug smuggling, Nigeria's Guardian newspaper have reported. Dabiri Erewa added that Nigeria's airports lacked the requisite security infrastructure check the activities of these drug cartels, especially those that incriminate unsuspecting travelers. Dabiri Erewa's controversial comments came as she addressed an ad hoc committee in the capital Abuja on the plight of Zainab Habibu Aliyu. Aliyu was arrested earlier in the year by the Saudi police after he and her family arrived in Jeddah when a suitcase falsely labeled with her name was found to contain 2,000 packs of the painkiller tramadol. And we end with Zimbabwe, where Zimbabwe Central Bank has secured a $500 million loan from unspecified international banks to support interbank currency trading from Monday and ease a dollar crunch that has brought fuel and medicine shortages, Governor John Madunya has said. The central bank introduced a new local currency in February, the RTGS dollar, and launched an interbank trading platform where businesses and individuals could buy and sell United States dollars. But dollars have been scarce on the official market, where a United States dollar fetches 3.5 RTGS dollars compared to 6.3 RTGS dollars on the black market. So that is the latest and from the news I had. But there also some news from South Sudan yesterday. Remember, there was something that was happening, an event that was happening in South Sudan yesterday. So I'll just read it from the Daily Nation, straight from the Daily Nation Kenyan newspaper. And this is what it says, that South Sudan President Salva Kiir has expressed a regret for investing oil resources in the war between him and former rebel leader Riek Machar. Speaking during the celebration of the Army Day at the military headquarters in Juba, yesterday, President Kiir said the resources spent on war would have been used to offer development on the people. And he said we waste our resources on pursuing unattainable wars when indeed we should be using such resources to build our country. All this time we have been using our resources, including the human resource, on fighting a senseless war. So that is sounds like a confession, or I don't know, is it a light bulb moment for South Sudan President Salva Kiir? Yesterday it was the military day, and they were celebrating that. Remember, it is in the remembrance of the war that started, was it in 1986? Please correct my date there if I'm not quite sure. That the southern part of Sudan attacked the other northern part of Sudan, and I think that triggered what now led to the secession of South Sudan. So it's normally commemorated on the 16th of May every year, but remember this year, as I was explaining here yesterday, it was not able to happen on the 16th of May because the government said they were ill prepared for the function, and so it happened yesterday. And during that function, when President Kiir was giving his address, he made that a very important, is it admission or confession or a light bulb moment? But things seems to be moving right now. But we're yet to see how that probably Machar will respond to that. President Kiir said that he feels he's regretting for investing oil resources in the war between him and his former, rebel leader, Riek Machar, who is former vice president, still is. Machar is waited to come back to Juba so that they can form the unity government and he can have back his position as part of the government and the ruling, government in South Sudan. And so that is a very... that is a good admission. Do you think it's a good admission on his part, President Kiir saying he regrets the money that was supposed to help the people of Sudan was instead diverted in fighting a war that was not very beneficial to the people of South Sudan? South Sudan right now is broke. I said here yesterday, in case you're watching and you missed it, last week, the country closed down about 40 embassies, across the world, and 39 diplomats were sacked. 39 embassies were closed, 40 diplomats were sacked. This is because the government was finding it very expensive and difficult to maintain its embassies across the world. And now when President Salva Kiir comes and makes this admission, I don't know, as a South Sudanese, how does this make you feel? Because I see a number of you here already joined on the show. Thank you so much. And Tap, Dak, you're saying good. I think you're responding. I don't know what the conversation you're having there earlier, but please let me know your thoughts on this. President Salva Kiir has come out to respond and has come out to admit that actually he regrets for investing oil resources in the war between him and Riek Machar. And just quoting part of the statement that he made, he said, "We wasted our resources on pursuing unattainable wars when indeed we should be using such resources to build our country. And all this time we have been using our resources, including the human resource, on fighting a senseless war." I don't even know how to feel about that. But is it? Do you think the admission, maybe now he's coming to the realization that all this time, all the wars, all the resources that were diverted in support of this war has been futile so far because nobody's winning. He's not winning because he cannot lead in peace. The vice president is over in Khartoum and has refused to come back. The war continues. Another report by the United Nations about a month ago said there's an increase of South Sudanese refugees in parts of the DRC and Uganda. They're running away because they're not safe. Their safety is not guaranteed. So the security forces and the human resource that is supposed to protect the citizens of South Sudan is not doing that. Instead, they're used to harm the same people they're supposed to be protecting. So the admission this morning or yesterday during the Military Day celebrations, the Army Day, celebrations at the military headquarters in Juba, President Kiir made this admission. How do you feel about that? South Sudanese, please, the ones who are watching me right now. How do you feel about that? He's regretting. Is it a little too late? The realization that finally, the president is having this light bulb moment. Yeah. So, Bolt Nyang, you're saying you're watching from Australia and you're saying this is true. Which part is true? That his admission maybe could be the beginning of better things and maybe a genuine reconciliation with Riek Machar and other fractions that, other players and stakeholders that have been part of this very unfortunate situation that has costed many lives. Innocent lives have been lost. Right now, the figure stands at around 400,000 plus innocent lives that have been lost since the start of this war in 2013. So this admission by South Sudan President Salva Kiir, will it even do anything? So part of that, let me just finish up with this South Sudan news. And it's covered in one of our dailies here, the Daily Nation, Kenyan leading newspaper. And it's saying, let's stop it and concentrate on development of our country so that we can move forward. This is an excerpt from President Kiir's speech yesterday during the Army Day celebration. Remember that which was supposed to take place on the 16th of May, but was postponed due to lack of preparedness by the government. So it happened yesterday, and all of a sudden, President President Salva Kiir has a light bulb moment. And he continued to say, I appeal to all of us to take this opportunity to implement the revitalized peace agreement collectively so that the little resources we have could be used for development. And also we have resources and ability to make a change in our country if we consolidate peace and stability and concentrate more on development. And then he finished by saying, I urge all of us to rally behind the signatories to the agreement for the speedy implementation of the agreement that aims to return peace and tranquility to our country, that is South Sudan. How do you feel about that? That speech by President Salva Kiir, is it a little too late? Is it the admission that and the regret that he's now expressing towards what his government has been doing that has been very wrong, and that is taking the resources that is supposed to benefit the people of South Sudan and diverting it and using it for the war that he's been fighting with Riek Machar? And now he's saying that is something he deeply regrets, and because that has not been very helpful for the country. And that has made South Sudan broke. And I think one of our viewers here said, today's Friday, on Wednesday, said, you're asking and you're wondering, how can a country that has oil running on its pipe 24 hours, that is every day, be broke? When we broke the news of the South Sudan's being very broke and closing down its embassies, 39 embassies across the world, and you're wondering why. So here it is. President Kiir is actually regretting, because the money that he was supposed to be taking care of such things were diverted in taking care of this war, and the human resource that was supposed to use for the betterment and the protection of the South Sudanese was also used to harm the same people that it was supposed to protect and it was supposed to take care. I don't even know how to feel about this. But maybe his admission on this could be a good start. Because, solving a problem, the first part of, finding a solution is identifying that there is a problem and identifying that you have a problem. Maybe this could be the admission by the president could be the first step towards finding really a genuine and lasting peace and a genuine, reconciliation with the other side and the rest of the stakeholders that are involved in finding a lasting peace in South Sudan. So let me know how you feel about that. Right now, I don't know, but I think it's a good thing. It's a good start towards probably finding a lasting peace in South Sudan. And of course, Malawi went to the polls on Tuesday, and right now the results, 75% of the votes have been counted. And the president, the incumbent, Peter Mutharika, has obtained 40% of the votes cast, compared with 35% of the main opposition leader, Lazarus Chakwera, and also his former vice president, who resigned and also vied for this presidential, elections, Mr. Saulos Chilima. He managed to gather about 18% of the votes. And remember, there have been questions and, allegations of vote rigging. And let me see if I can get that story here on the Daily Nation. Not so much, but they even accused a former security officer from Zimbabwe of interfering with the elections. And remember, yesterday during yesterday's Good Morning edition, there was a tweet. I mentioned a tweet by Martin Fayulu, also the opposition leader in the Democratic Republic of Congo, who called on the Malawians to come out and be vigilant and protect their votes, because according to him, the Malawian Electoral Commission was tampering with the true voice of the Malawians, and it's in favor of the incumbent Mr. Peter Mutharika. And so he was calling upon them to be vigilant. I do not understand exactly what he meant by that, but I give an example. Here in Kenya, when the opposition leader, he's still the opposition leader, Mr. Raila Odinga, now the AU Special Envoy for Infrastructure, would give such a directive, his supporters will take that literally. When he says, go protect your votes. They will literally want to, near the polling stations and physically want to protect the votes, literally. So it was not very clear what he meant by that, Mr. Martin Fayulu, the DRC opposition leader, when he tweeted towards addressing the, Malawians on the just concluded elections. Right now, the incumbent, Mr. Peter Mutharika, is leading with 40% of the votes that have been tallied so far. And it's yes, and Malawi system is just like Kenyan, and I think that is why it's very because it's a winner takes it all kind of system. And with that, in Kenya there's a caveat. If you are contesting the elections, or the president has not garnered 50+1 of the votes that were cast, then there is bound to be a re-election, a runoff rather, for just the two leading contestants. But in this case, in Malawi, there's no runoff. Even if the president leads by 20% of the votes cast, he'll still be declared the president. So the 78-year-old Mr. Mutharika is set to serve next term, even as we wait for the official, and the final presidential results declaration by the Malawian Electoral Commission. Let me see what you guys are saying out there. At top, Dak, you're saying the fact here is lying to himself. You mean President Salva Kiir is lying to himself, yeah? But I'm not sure if he regrets, because he was the one who killed the civilians instead of armies fight each other. All right, your sentiments. And Abdisamad Ali, good morning to you from Mogadishu. Thank you for watching. Saki, Richard, and Kana, you saying welcome Africa. Indeed, welcome to you, and good morning. Thank you for watching. And Bon Yang, you're saying it's too late. You think it's too late, the confession by President Salva Kiir? You think it's not going to do something as it is right now? Anything that could lead to the unity government? You think this is not one of them? Him coming to a realization that all this wars and misdirection of funds of the people of South Sudan is wrong? You think it's not a good step? It's not a good step towards probably a hopeful, a better tomorrow? All right. Lamin Jame, you're saying it's too late for him. Oh, it's too late for Salva Kiir. All right. Okay. Oh, Abdi Samad. Why do I keep confusing you with... Who is the other Ali? You're from Norway. We have another friend of ours here who watches us from Mogadishu. We keep, especially me, I keep confusing you with that. But thank you for watching. And Ombesh Arthur, you're saying good morning from me. And good morning to you too. And Beneth Onyekachuku, you're saying you're watching from Italy. And all Biafrans are staying at home on 30th May. And you're saying we must continue. So, yes, the Biafrans have declared that on 30th of May is going to be a sit at home protesting. Could you remind me what you're protesting on that day? It is the day that, hold on, 3.5 Nigerians were killed at the start of the Biafra war, and the government has refused to recognize this day. Did I get it right? If not, please correct me. I stand to be corrected. So there will be a sit at home that Biafrans have announced on 30th of May. Saki, Richard, and Kana, you're saying Kiir is bad. Okay. Your sentiments there. And of course, the war in... before the war in Libya, before I get there, let's just stay with the Sudans. Just another minute or so. And Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman has held talks with the deputy head of Sudan's Transitional Military Council, General Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo, in Jeddah. Of course, the state-owned Saudi's press have reported. This comes after Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates have promised to give Sudan $3 billion together. $3 billion in aid of Sudan, throwing a lifeline to the junta, which overthrew President Omar al-Bashir. I'm not sure what really is happening here, but you have seen they have been very very special interest being expressed from the UAE and, of course, now Saudi Arabia. And together, the UAE and Saudi Arabia have promised to give Sudan a whopping $3 billion US. They're giving the military. I don't know if that will be shared. That is for the whole of Sudan, but it has been handed in the hands of the military. I don't want to start allegations here, but yes, that is what is happening right now. And in case you're wondering what is happening to the talks that right now did not happen yesterday, I don't know if they're happening today. Well, a certain journalist who has an insider there that is giving them this information. They're saying that the coalition has offered a transitional military council leader, Abdul Fattah al-Burhan, the role of a leader of the sovereign body that was to lead the 3-year transition. So the coalition between the protesters and the activists, together with so that part has said that the leader, the army leader, could take the position of the sovereign body, could be the leader of the sovereign body of the transitional government for the 3 years transition period that they had already agreed on. Both sides agreed on that. But the TMCs, that is the Transition Military Council, rejected that on the grounds that the coalition wanted a civilian Burhan. So the Burhan seems to have more powers than what the army leader was supposed to have. So Burhan was going to be ahead of the army leader, and in which case he was expected to retire from the army in order to hold the post. Neither the coalition nor the TMC has confirmed the report, but apparently that has become a bone of contention, and both sides are not really agreeing to that. So it's still a stalemate in the talks in Sudan, and in agreeing in the manner in which the Transitional Council is going to lead this country in the 3 years of transition. And the talks have been halted. There were no talks yesterday. And now we see that the deputy head of Sudan's Transitional Military Council is in Saudi Arabia and is met with the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, who doesn't have a very good track record when it comes to certain things like human rights. You know, it's Saudi Arabia. So anyway, let's see when he returns to Sudan, how that, what else, what other changes? Will the talks move forward? What will happen after that? And then in Libya, of course, the rockets yesterday struck a luxury hotel in Libya's capital in Tripoli. And it is believed that renegade General Khalifa Haftar forces were responsible for the assault. And there have been pictures of the rooms being destroyed at the Rixos Hotel, where legislators opposed to the general were meeting. So this seems to have been a target assault towards the legislators in Libya who were meeting in this hotel. And the photos have been published by the Interior Ministry there, still worrying reports there from Libya. And in Uganda, very interesting things happen. I mean, wonders will never cease. I don't know, it's just people are just ignorant, or people are just, whatever it is that one can do to get better. So apparently, Ugandan police have arrested a 25-year-old British man and 2 Ugandans for allegedly taking part in a miracle cure scam. Now, Samuel Albert, Samula Tadeop, and Sam Little, these are 3 people, all Sams, were arrested early on Thursday, that is yesterday morning, in the town of Fort Portal in western Uganda, and they were accused of giving Ugandans a chemical made from chlorine dioxide, an industrial bleach, by the way, calling it a mineral miracle solution and saying it cures diseases like cancer and malaria. And it's just the other day here, I was reading of such a scam also. Was it in Zimbabwe or South Africa, one of those countries, where they were told, you know what, you will, when you take this, you will even be cured from HIV and AIDS. I mean, it's interesting, and people are taking advantage of some people who really don't know any better. Thorn Joe Kathian, you're saying Kir is great. Okay, I get one person who supports Kir. It's not often. It doesn't happen very often here. Thank you. So Thorn Joe Kathian, you're saying Kir is great. Abdisamad Ali, you're saying Africa swings between white and Arab colonial power. Yes. And Saki Richard Akana, you're saying great. The kill guys in South Sudan, you say good. Okay. Okay. So the killed guys in South Sudan, yes, 400,000 plus, over and above. Since the start of war in 2013, the United Nations, official figures show that. You're saying, Thorn, you're saying Kir must stay. Why? Why are you the only person here? You think he's doing well in South Sudan? Please give us your reasons. I'm sure the rest of South Sudanese would really want to hear that. And Michir Awan Garang, you're saying Kir will leave the powers at the right time, but not this thing called red card movement. Okay, now this red card movement, I don't know what happened, because there was a lot of hype on social media, on Twitter, and I think last week, another South Sudanese told me that, you know what? Red Card movement only exists on social media. It's not really on the ground. So when they were organizing this protest on May 16th, and it was very hyped. So we reported it here a couple of days, and on 16th May, we wanted to get the updates on what was happening in the streets of Juba. But before that, just 2 days before that, one of the ministers in South Sudan, I don't know the minister for what, came out to say, anyone who will dare show up in the streets of Sudan, in South Sudan, you must be prepared, whatever that may befall you. So that must have scared people off. Is it that scared people off, or just red card movement did not just do enough mobilization? Or maybe the red card movement, a lot of South Sudanese youth especially, who were the ones expected to participate in this protest, are not buying into its ideals. So what is it that is happening with this red card movement? Please shed some light. I don't know much about it. I was hoping to learn more on the 16th of May. Apparently that protest did not happen. And just before that also, President Salva Kiir came out to say, as long as things like that continue to happen, and as long as the attacks on his government continues to happen, you are only prolonging his stay in office. And he said he really does not want to stay in that office longer than you don't want him to. But as long as those attacks continue to happen against his administration, and causing that insecurity and wars and eruption of wars every now and then you're only allowing him more mandate and more time to stay, because he cannot just, leave. And as South Sudan elections are supposed to be happening, is it next year or the other year? I'll confirm that. But it's geared towards the election. But elections cannot be until there is a proper ground for that. The environment is conducive to even conduct that, and that can only happen when this unity government has been realized, everything and all the contentious issues have been ironed out. So maybe it might not even happen. The elections might not even happen. But you know what? That is yet to be seen, because I think one step at a time. We need the peace deal. We need that, the keys by the Pope to really, the effect. We need to see the fruit of that. So after we've seen that, and Machar has been assured of his security, he can come back to Juba, and then they can form the unity government. And then now, after a while, they can think about elections, because conditions right now are not conducive for anything in the name of elections in South Sudan. Even the Army Day was a problem for the South Sudan government to take care of. So a general election, I don't think so. So let them just work on what is important right now. All right. John Clark, thank you for joining. Today, your friend is not here, but he'll be joining later in a short bit, and we'll be looking at the news that made headlines this week in Africa. But you're saying, I think of Sudan problems can only be solved by religious leaders, that African leaders they done less in achieving peace for the people of Sudan in years now, and the leaders of Africa just watch. Did you just mention religious leaders? When you said that, I just looked at the context of what we have today in Kenya and what the religious leader even doing. They've gone all the way to, they're doing things we never expected from religious leaders here. So I don't know how that is in South Sudan and Sudan, but I know in South Sudan, the Catholic Church came out to criticize, have been very critical of and raising a lot of alarm, very critical on Salva Kiir's government. Yes, the Catholic Church in South Sudan has been very vocal and has been speaking out on what is happening in South Sudan. So I don't know if that could be the solution. If they could join the table, then that would be a good thing, even in Sudan. And Tap Dak, you're saying Thorn Ajok Athian, and Thorn Ajok is the one who is saying that President Kiir is doing a fantastic job in South Sudan. And Tap Dak, you are responding to that, and you're saying you're standing with him because he's from your tribe. It's not because he's doing right. Okay. But do you know Thorn Ajok's tribe, or you're just assuming? Has he said I've not seen that. Maybe I don't know, but that is your sentiment. And Benneth Onyekanyuchuku, you're saying you're watching from Italy, and you must continue. All hail Biafra. The world should know what is happening in Enugu state of Biafra land. The zoo call Nigeria government them have closed the only international airport that we have in Biafra land, and the world should see that the zoo called Nigeria is doing okay. It's doing in Biafra land. Okay. I've really tried to dissect that sentence. But what our viewer here, Benneth, you're saying the world should really know the atrocities that are happening in Biafra. I have a report here for Biafra, and I've seen somebody ask me about what is happening in Ambazonia. I'll look for that in a minute. But in Biafra, this was from yesterday, of course, the 19th anniversary celebration of Chief Ralph Uwazu Ruike-led movement for the actualization of the sovereign state of Biafra, otherwise called Biafra Independent Movement, turned fatal on Wednesday when police opened fire on members of the movement. Now that happened before yesterday. That was on Wednesday, and 2 members of the movement were reported killed, while no fewer than 10 members of the movement were arrested and 15 sustained serious bullet wounds. So the leaders of Biafra on Wednesday alleged that several of their members were arrested in Enugu state. Is that what you're referring to, Benneth? Is it Benneth or who? Yeah, Benneth. Is that what you're referring to? Some members of Biafra land were arrested in Enugu state, and their whereabouts are not known. And of course, IPOB spokesperson Emma Powerful, his name is Emma Powerful, and he's a radio icon of Biafra Radio, right? Did I get that right? I think. And in a statement said that the unspecified number of their members were arrested around Nike area of Enugu State and Road Nsukka. Okay. Now, according to a 2016 Amnesty International report, it accused the Nigerian military of embarking on a chilling campaign of extrajudicial executions and violence that resulted in the death of at least 150 peaceful pro-Biafran protesters over the course of the year. And of course, the military has denied these claims, and that is the military of Nigeria has come out to deny these claims. But this is a report by Amnesty International, a human rights international body, And then, of course, in 2015, after Kanu said at a conference in Los Angeles that his group needed guns and bullets, he was arrested by the Nigerian government and charged with criminal conspiracy, intimidation, and membership in an illegal organizations. And of course, Kanu's lawyer said that his comments were just political rhetoric and not an actual call to arms. That was in 2015. And that made Kanu spend 19 months in Nnamdi Kanu. You know who I'm talking about, I'm sure. Nnamdi Kanu spent 19 months in prison without trial before being released on bail in 2007. And later that year, according to IPOB, the Nigerian army raided his palatial home in Abia State, where Aba is located, and killed several of his supporters. And so that triggered what has been happening there, and ending killings that have been experienced in Biafra land. And of course, that is what made Nnamdi Kanu ran away from Nigeria. He was wanted to answer some of these charges, even after being incarcerated for 17 years. He took off, and is it 17 years? Let me just confirm that. No, he spent 19 months in prison, 19 months in prison, and after that, he went for asylum, and he was in Israel for a while. Right now, I think he's in London. Mishir Awan Garanyo saying, we are still healing from our wounds. No return back to war as South Sudanese again. Kir is committed to implement peace agreement with his friend Riek Machar. Very positive sentiments. Maybe people need to adopt this, but it's good you acknowledge that there are still some wounds, which is true. And and that is what people have been calling for, because as much as they're speaking about this peace and starting a new South Sudan, we can 400,000 plus lives that have been lost since the start of this war. Somebody must take responsibility. Some form of justice must be seen to be done. So it's good that you, Mishir Awan Garang, you acknowledge that, because the people are still hurting. People are still hurting, and as much as that is, there has to be a way for justice also to be seen to be happening, even as the talks of peace and unity government continue. That is something that cannot be ignored and must be addressed and must be part of the important things that they are talking about when they sit down and have these forums, and when they're having these peace talks and reconciliation and unity government. The 400,000 people plus, somebody must think about them, must speak on their behalf. Otherwise, wounded people will be walking around. I see here in Kenya, even after the post-election violence, fine, the leaders come together and now we have a very wonderful handshake, but there are people who are still hurting, and anything can be a trigger. Some lost their livelihood, some lost their whole family members, some lost everything they've worked for all of their lives. And you just want to tell them, now you're shaking hands, and now we just forgiven each other, and you're supposed to be okay. Even in this country, there are people who are hurting. And of course, the Building Bridges initiative is working on collecting views and finding a way where there could be a forum where Kenyans can truly heal and reconcile and justice be. I hope that is what the Building of Bridges initiative is actually doing out there right now. But in South Sudan, people are hurting. People have been hurt. People left their homes years outside there, and they're hoping for a day where they'll be able to come back and restart their lives in their country. So it's not an easy thing. It's not just about Riek Machar and President Salva Kiir. It's a bigger picture, bigger than these two and the rest of the stakeholders involved in this. So I hope somebody can see this and somebody can actually speak on behalf of the South Sudanese who are still hurting. So you know what? I want to take a very short break, and when I come back, please continue writing. I see that you're writing. Mishir Awan Garang, that is Tapdak. You're responding to Mishir and you're saying, how will you heal our wound when you have civilians that are still in refugee camps in their native country? Can you give me an answer to that? All right. Yes. Very valid question there. But I don't know if Mishir Awan has an answer to that. But maybe if he does, because everybody should be part of this, in a solution should be, even the Sudanese, South Sudanese should be involved in this process. And when you raise such very pertinent questions, that is something that the government should know, that its people wants to know. How do we heal from this? You're telling the other person to come back and start this unity government, but what about us, the citizens of South Sudan, who have bared the brunt of this ugly, unnecessary war? But at the beginning of the show, I said in one of our dailies here, President Salva Kiir says he regretted for investing oil resources in the war between him and former President Salva Kiir. And he regretted for diverting the resources that was meant to uplift the lives of South Sudanese, to take care of its citizens. He diverted that resources to do other things and to take care of the war, fighting its own people. So President Salva Kiir came out to admit his regret on that. So I had asked earlier, could it be the right step towards finding a genuine, peace and reconciliation in South Sudan? I don't know. You tell me. So keep writing and I'll keep reading your responses. But right now, I'd like to take a very short break. And please don't go too far. I'll see you on the other side of the break. This is Good Morning Africa. And I am Miriam Ogutu. Good morning. Or rather, it is afternoon, I believe. Yes, it is afternoon. 11 minutes past noon here in Nairobi. Good afternoon.
We discuss Africa. We see what ails Africa. And today, this afternoon, we want to see whether Sudan will permanently remain a sick child of Africa. Is it a permanent sickness? Can we resolve the issues of Southern Sudan? Is it something that has gone wrong for 200 years? There has always been a problem in Southern Sudan, in that great region, starting from all the way the Alimadi Wars and the rest of all what happened until today. Peace seems to be elusive. Why has UN taken slow action? Why hasn't UN set up a tribunal? We want to see a tribunal that will make sure that Southern Sudan people are accountable. Those who committed crimes against the human beings. 20,000 Sudanese perished. They are perished. They are not accountable. Nobody can account for them. And we cannot sit here, go on hammering peace agreements without mechanisms of accountability. If we set a tribunal for Sierra Leone, for Rwanda, for Camera Rouge, we need somebody to stand up for the poor masses, the masses that have died, the masses that continue to die, the masses that are being brutalized, murdered, maimed on a daily basis by marauding armies of both Riek Machar and Salva Kiir. There must be an accountability. You are not going to sit here and tell people there is no accountability in Southern Sudan. There must be a tribunal. Why do we run to harass countries of Kenya, put ICC on Kenya, put ICC on this country, put ICC on Central African Republic? Why have we delayed on putting a tribunal for Southern Sudan to find out who is killing, who has been killing, how they have been killing people? Let me speak for the people in Southern Sudan, the women, the children who have not gone to school, the children who have no medicine, the children who have nothing, who have been running since 2013, and the war cannot end because of two people. Let them face the tribunal. I'm not going to keep quiet as a Pan-African to see Southern Sudan being maimed, being tortured, being cut, dismembered. And we keep quiet and watch people vote images of people, of malcontents singing to us in Uganda, in Kenya, in Ethiopia, in South Africa, telling us they have money. Let them face the international tribunal and tell the tribunal who gave them the guns, where they buying them, how they were killing people. Enough of it, enough. Enough is enough for Africa. We have had enough. There is no need of that anymore. Enough is enough. And if people have died, they will not cry. We people who are left on planet Earth must cry for them. We must find justice for them. We must make sure that there are leaders who go on bragging on television stations all over the world who are accountable. They must be behind bars.
Welcome back and thank you for staying tuned. This is Good Morning Africa. Unfortunately, Dr. Matanga was taking care of some business and was in a meeting, and he's been held up, so he may not be able to join me for this last hour. But I'll do a couple of minutes, and then we'll have some previous show play later in a while. But we've been looking at what has been making headlines in Africa this afternoon, and we've looked at South Sudan and the new developments in South Sudan, and we've looked also at Sudan, and now we've looked at, of course, let's just look at Uganda now. And Uganda's High Court on Thursday, that is yesterday, blocked a government bid to suspend dozens of top journalists on the grounds that their coverage of the arrest of pop star Member of Parliament Bobi Wine had endangered national security. Remember, some days back, the pop star and now Member of Parliament, Robert Changulanyi, his name, aka Bobi Wine, was arrested for. The government looked for, I don't know, something he did last year in July. Apparently, he organized an unlawful protest last year in July. So the government of Uganda thought it very wise last month to arrest him. And they took him to jail. So when he was being arrested, it was chaotic and not very nice. And so media houses were there to cover this event, as they should, because this is a matter of national interest, right? And this is a person who has expressed interest in vying for the presidency in the next elections of Uganda. But the government said no. You're not supposed to do that, because by you covering this, you are actually endangering the national security. So about 13 of leading journalists in Uganda, that includes even the editors and producers and heads of programming, were the government actually wanted them suspended and maybe their licenses taken from them. They're practicing, cards or something. And so they have not been working for now since that incident happened last month. And so yesterday, two activists had petitioned the court on behalf of Uganda Journalists Association to have the orders struck down. And so what happened yesterday is the Ugandan Communication Commission earlier this month called for the 13 radio and TV stations to suspend their news anchors. The Uganda Communication Commission, I think this is a parastatal and is headed by funded by the Ugandan government. I think it's a parastatal under the Ugandan government. And so it wanted 13 radio and TV stations, 13 radio and TV stations to suspend their news anchors, editors, producers, head of programming over the coverage of the latest detention of popular rapper and politician. I remember this incident really did not augur well with a lot of Bobi Wine supporters, and after he left jail, he spent 2 nights in jail. I can't remember the name of that jail. Doctor would know. And after that, a week later or so, I think they formed a coalition. That happened earlier this month or late last month. They formed late last month. Is it? Or earlier this month? I'm not sure. But they formed a coalition now with the perennial Uganda's opposition leader, what is his name? Dr. Kizza Besigye. And nothing much have been known to have developed after that agreement they signed together to work together for in the coming general election, presidential election. And so we're yet to see any developments over that. And so, but yesterday, that ruling was, the petition, after the two activists petitioned the court on behalf of the Uganda Journalists Association, they actually won that. And so Uganda's High Court on Thursday blocked a government bid to suspend the top journalists. So that is not going to happen. I'm surprised that actually Ugandan court, can go against the government. So it's sometimes it can be independent, because a lot of, especially judicial institutions in Africa, sometimes there's a high-handedness, especially in Uganda, a high-handedness in matters that is between the state and another body or another person. Normally, it favors the government or something like that. Because we saw just before that ruling just before the Bobi Wine incident, judges in the Supreme Court of Uganda, somebody had gone to petition about the age limit of presidential candidates in Uganda, and majority ruled that that cannot be upheld. It does not matter how old you are, you can vie for the presidency of Uganda. And that was seen as sort of a scratch my back and a scratch your back thing, because a lot of these judges who were a part of that panel also wanted the age limit for the Supreme Court judges to be increased. I don't know right now the minimum age one can serve as a Supreme Court judge in Uganda, but they wanted that to be increased, to be allowed to serve more term. So it was a sort of a scratch my back, scratch your back sort of a situation between those judges and the government. So yeah, that is what the analysts who understand the dynamics of the Ugandan politics were saying. And there have been worrying events in Tanzania. And yesterday, opposition parties in Tanzania are demanding now for electoral reforms ahead of local elections in October and presidential polls next year. And these parties include CCK, NLD, Chadema Party, ACT Wazalendo, among others. They have formed a coalition and they're calling for the creation of an independent electoral commission. These are things that I never heard before President John Magufuli. And since he's coming into power, there have been a lot of allegations over human rights abuse. Remember, just 2 days ago, a coalition of human rights groups, NGOs, said they're going to petition at the United Nations forum in June that is supposed to happen on human rights. They're going to petition the United Nations to ask President Magufuli to answer to some allegations and some questions of human rights abuses that are continually happening in Tanzania. And now we see the opposition parties in Tanzania coming together and demanding for electoral reforms. The same is happening in Uganda. The same has been happening in Kenya. They've been demanding for it since God knows when. But these are calls that were never heard in Tanzania before. So what is really happening in Tanzania right now under the leadership of President Pombe Magufuli? It's interesting. These are things you never heard before. Tanzania is just one of those countries in Africa that, chaos. You don't hear of chaos. You don't hear of opposition crackdown. But now you hear even one of the parties here, Chadema leader, their leader, was it 3 weeks ago, he was kidnapped and found dumped at a certain village far off from the capital, and people wondering why. And he was kidnapped by, for those who saw, an armed forces, even for himself, he said. So what is really happening in Tanzania? Something is happening in Pombe Magufuli's government, and Yes, I hope it does not escalate. And let's see that meeting that is to happen next month at the UN, when the activists go there to petition the United Nations to make President Magufuli accountable for what is happening in the country. Let's see how that will play out in the bigger picture. All right, and of course, there's been a case here that happened in Nigeria. A very young lady was arrested in Saudi Arabia. Apparently, she had drugs. I was watching this on CNN sometimes back. But now, the chairman and the chief executive officer of the Nigerians in Diaspora Commission has accused Ethiopian Air and Egypt Air of operating drug cartels in Nigeria. Yeah? So they've accused these two airlines of operating drug cartels in Nigeria. This following the framing of several people who were arrested and subsequently released on allegations of drug smuggling, Nigerian Guardian newspaper have reported. Now, the chief executive officer, Dabiri Erewa, said that Nigeria's airports lacked the requisite security infrastructure to check the activities of these drug cartels, especially that incriminate unsuspecting travelers. Now, Dabiri Erewa's controversial comments came as she addressed an ad hoc committee in the capital Abuja on the plight of Zainab Habibu Aliya. Now, this is the lady that was caught in Saudi Arabia. Now, Aliya was arrested earlier in the year by Saudi police after she and her family arrived in Jeddah when a suitcase falsely labeled with her name was found to contain 2,000 packs of the painkiller Tramadol. So you were traveling, you check your luggage, and somebody, like, how do you do that? So this person, the chairman and the chief executive officer of the Nigerian Diaspora Commission, is saying that the Ethiopian Air and Egyptian Air are working in cahoots with the drug cartels in Nigeria to make this happen. Because I'm thinking in an airport, once you've checked your luggage, it's gone. Once you've given it, then it's found with a different luggage is found with your name labeled on it. Now that's interesting, because how did you get the details of the other passenger that you're traveling with on this plane? So that is what this Dabiri Erewa is raising, and this is a very serious matters. And I think that Nigerian authorities should really look into it. This lady was shocked to find herself in a police cell in an alien country, Saudi Arabia. You're being told you had drugs. She asked, what do you mean I had drugs? Because the bags that were found with the drugs were labeled with your name on it. And she was actually shocked. And she was wrongfully jailed, and thank God she was able to be released. But it's not always, because a country like Saudi Arabia, that the penalty to that could even be death. So it's a miracle that they were not quick to do that, to kill her. So these are things that the government of Nigeria must really come and address very, very quickly. So just I'll probably go through the news making headlines this afternoon in Kenya. Just look at the headlines of the dailies here, and the Star newspaper. What is on the headlines is saying that the EACC recovers titles, evidence against Waititu. Now the anti-corruption officers carry out simultaneous raids on governors' properties, county offices, and arrest several top officials. That story is in page 4, and apparently let me just read something here and get the details straight. Now, the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission on Thursday raided Kiambu Governor Ferdinand Waititu's homes and offices and found evidence linking him to 588 million county cash that was lost. Now, the governor is accused of awarding tenders to companies associated with him and his immediate family members, through which the millions were siphoned from public offers. Now, the EACC Chief Executive Officer Tuali Barak said they found evidence linking the YT2 to the 588 million Kenya shillings irregular tenders, fraudulent acquisition of public funds, a conflict of interest, and money laundering. Well, I was watching this drama unfold yesterday because it was very dramatic and made headlines, and it was live in all our major TV stations and all that, as it always is. And I was just sitting there thinking, is this another political gimmick? Will the EACC actually follow up on this matter, and will we see any prosecutions? At the end of the day, as a Kenyan, let me tell you, it's like I've had it. It's normally it's headlines. It's chaotic. It's popular. I don't understand, because you would think that the EACC will just go there quietly, get the governor, take him or whatever they need as evidence or they need to look at, take him to their offices quietly, do the investigations. If they find something, let the public know. But all this drama that surrounds a lot of these arrests of especially the politicians or people of public interest, and then the end of the day, months later, nothing really comes out of it. I think Kenyans are just tired of these gimmicks. Can they just do the investigations or the arrest quietly, and not that I'm holding a brief for anybody? I'm just saying. And then let's just see these people in court and charges labeled and people prosecuted, and getting people to return these monies that they have stolen from the public and getting jailed. Because this war on corruption has become very, it's become like a popular show. Enough with that. Oh, John Clark, you're saying our signal is very poor today. I apologize. I hope that production have heard of that. Emanuela Kur, you're saying President Kiir is not serious about implementing peace agreement. He said due to lack of fund. Really, a year will come, pass, there still be no peace in South Sudan. South Sudan officially produced about 175,000 pounds. Under the table, the production is about 375,000. There is the money. Where does the money go? You should ask yourself, Kiir supporters. Oh, I think barrels. 175,000 barrels, and now they used to produce. The production now is 375,000 barrels. Could you please clarify that for me especially, and for the rest of our viewers? So you're saying, yes, South Sudan. But you see, Emanuela Kur, thank you for that. Thank you for your comment. But this is what happened, because you're wondering, when the South Sudan is producing all this money, where does it go? President Kiir, can I find that paper again? President Salva Kiir came out to say he's actually regretting now for misappropriating this money that was supposed to help the South Sudanese, yes, and for investing this money in a war between him and his deputy, Dr. Riek Machar. So President Kiir came out to say he is regretting this, for channeling this money that is supposed to have been helping the people of South Sudan. Instead, it has been causing nothing but harm towards the people of South Sudan. So Emanuela, do you think by President Salva Kiir's admission of this grave mistake that his government has done for the people of South Sudan, misappropriating of funds, and now they have to go begging from the international community, while South Sudan can actually be self-sustenance? South Sudan has all it takes for it to be actually self-reliable, and take care of its affairs without anybody patronizing or anybody seeking for funds, because they have oil and other resources in South Sudan. But because of the mismanagement of even the funds that the government has been receiving, now it has been impossible. And South Sudan's government is broke. Yes, the government admitted it's broke, closing down 39 embassies. It cannot sustain that. But you're wondering, with these figures that you're giving, how can South Sudan be broke? How can the government say they don't have money? Well, the president has admitted, because the money the government was receiving was being channeled in ways that was not very helpful to the South Sudanese people. And so he is expressing regret. So by him expressing regret, do you think is a good step towards now, an open talk and maybe a new start, and that could lead to the realization of the peace deal and finally the formation of the unity government? Emanuela, please talk to me. Let me know what you think about that. And we apologize about our poor signals. Please, yes, let me know if it has become better. Emmanuel Nyakonda, you're saying Zimbabwe is rotating clueless ministers and it's out of order. Okay, what is happening in Zimbabwe? Please let me know. And do you know yesterday, the government jailed 4 NGO members for allegedly being involved in activities that are meant to topple the government of President Mnangagwa. I don't know your thoughts on that. One of them was from, I think, Transparency International. I can't remember the rest, which NGOs they were. But the government is alleging that they were in which country? And they were training to come back and cause a civil unrest, and also they were posing a threat to the national security of Zimbabwe. So yesterday, they received their jail time. Actually, is it a lifetime? I will confirm that. And Tapdak, you're saying, my question will be to him, why he regrets now, and he was the one who caused the war in the first place. But Tapdak, sometimes you can go on and do something over and over and over and over and over again, and then it gets to a point you realize this thing is not working anymore. So maybe I need to come to the realization of that, and maybe President Salva Kiir has just realized that, perhaps this is not the right way to do it. And because this is what my administration has been doing it, and has not been working very well for the people of South Sudan. So maybe I need to stop doing this. Do you think it's too late that President Kiir has made this realization? And will this realization and this express of regret bring any changes, or will it mark a new beginning for the people of South Sudan? Do you think this might mean anything in terms of genuine reconciliation of the different political divides, and they can have a come together and foster a better tomorrow forward for the people of South Sudan? Does this mean anything? Does this change anything for you as a South Sudanese? Please tell me. Tell me what you think of that. Emmanuel Nyakonda, you're saying the Minister of Transport failed to prioritize in just 1 week in office. Please give us the details. I want to know what you're really talking about. I want to know what that minister did. Please, Emmanuel Nyakonda, if you could do that, please, I'll appreciate. And still in the news making headlines in Africa this morning. Now, there's this bishop in Kenya. This is very bizarre, that decided to exhume some 3 bodies in Kenya. Let me see this story. It's very spooky. It's like a bad Halloween prank. Let me just see what's happening. Okay. It's a very short story, so I'll go through it very quick. Now, the High Court in Kitale, that is a town in the western part of Kenya, has sentenced a pastor for 25 years in prison for defiling and later killing a secondary school student. No, this is a different one. This is also a pastor who did that. Oh, no, okay, this is the story. Cleric arrested for exhuming relatives. But that also shocked me. A pastor killed a student. Okay, what's happening in Kenya? All right, now a cleric was yesterday arrested after he was found exhuming bodies of his relatives at Kinamba in Naivasha yesterday. Bishop Samuel Macharia of Christ Exalt Adoption Church, even the name of the church, wanted to exhume 7 bodies, including those of his wife, son, and mother, so he could sell the land to the owner of a nearby quarry. By the time the police and public health officials pounced on him, Macharia of the Akorino faith had already disinterred 3 bodies. He had already exhumed 3 bodies. This is really spooky. And some bodies are said to have been buried over 20 years ago. The latest was buried 3 years ago. He told the police he planned to rebury the bodies on another piece of land. Oh my God. This is just interesting. I think he wanted to sell the land, and nobody can buy lands with the graveyard on it. So he wanted to go bury it somewhere. This is for his wife, for his son, and his mother. Like, you really must have some nerve to even do something. This is your late mom and your darling, your wife, and your child. And wow. Anyway, that is really something there to worry about. So those are just some of the news making headlines this morning in in Kenya. And of course, the war on graft, as I read earlier, Kiambu governor was arrested yesterday over the misappropriation of the 588 million Kenya shillings that I just read earlier. But what really is catching my attention here is the headlines on the Daily Nation saying Treasury chiefs hid 78 billion Kenya shillings budget hole. Now, experts accuse ministry of overshooting ceiling given by Parliament and approved through a policy statement, cautioning that this could result in the need for a supplementary budget to avoid a negative impact on development projects. I don't know what that means, but I'll just read here. Now, the National Treasury is hiding Kenya's true budget deficit. Now look at that. By using wrong figures, the Parliamentary Budget Office, PBO, has said. The Budget Office, which is funded by the taxpayer to provide professional services to members of Parliament, says Treasury is masking the true deficit by using a set of numbers that ignores adjustments. The office also accused the Treasury of overshooting the budget ceiling given by Parliament and approved through its own budget policy statement, which is prepared months in advance. And the PBO says the 2019-2020 budget is higher than the approved ceiling by 78 billion Kenya shillings. So basically, the budget that the Treasury Cabinet Secretary Henry Rotich sort of presented the other day to the public. The budget will be read next month. For all East African countries, they do the budget reading the same day. That is Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Rwanda. I don't know if Burundi does that. The same day. And now we are told that the figures that the CS for Treasury gave are wrong. 78 billion shillings was somehow not mentioned in that. I tell you, the things that happen in this country, it's just unbelievable. And then here, tough times ahead as inflation steep rise. Food is likely to be scarce, the price of electricity to go up as incomes from agriculture set to fall. And this is in Kenya. Inflation might hit an all-time high of 11% as a result of the prolonged drought earlier in the year. The Parliamentary Budget Office has warned, signaling tough times for Kenyans already reeling under high cost of living. Okay, so a gloomy situation here for Kenyans. Seems like there will be nothing to smile about in a while. If it's not money being stolen from public coffers, and now we're looking at an inflation. Right now, life is very difficult here basic commodities are becoming increasingly expensive and very expensive for a normal Kenyan to actually afford. People are forced to cut down on their food intake, to cut down on certain things, the basic things that actually you can't really live without, but it's becoming increasingly expensive, and life has become very expensive for an ordinary Kenyan. Then you wake up to these headlines of money being lost, 588 million Kenya shillings being misappropriated, and this and this happening, mega scandals happening, and then you're wondering, okay, what is really happening? What is government doing about it? So Kenyans, you should brace yourself for tough times ahead. Apparently, because of the poor rains that the country has been experiencing, the food prices might go up, and there might be a scarcity of a lot of your daily supplies and your groceries. So Kenyans, please brace yourself for that. You might need to change your diet, adopt other things. I don't know if that would work, but you know what? That is what that is the alert that has been given. Emmanuel Nyakonda, I think are you responding to that question I asked? So you're saying about the Minister of Transport in Zimbabwe who has failed to prioritize after 1 week being in office. But 1 week, is it not too early to judge? But let me just read what you said. You're saying roads across the country have potholes, really bad, causing accidents. Okay. Emmanuel, you're saying should have been the first plan. All right. And okay, so maybe he's all right. So you keep me posted on this story, and I'll try getting the latest of this from Zimbabwe. The Minister of Transport apparently is not doing very well. And there have been allegations and, of course, a lot of murmuring about the kind of people President Mnangagwa has put in charge of some of these ministries in Zimbabwe. They are not qualified. There has been such allegations and claims, and so now we have one of our viewers here saying even the Minister of Transport, although he's been in office, is it for 1 year or for 1 week? Did you say 1 week? 1 week in office, it's too, maybe, don't you, Emmanuel Nyakonda, don't you think he needs probably some time? And then you can judge him after, say, 3 months and see if his priorities are in the right place. 1 week might be a little too early to judge, you don't think? Okay, but just let me know. Oh, you say they have no potential. All right. Okay. And Tap Duck, you're saying, thank you, miss. I appreciate your question. About, is it too late to reconcile within South Sudan? Okay, so this is what you're saying. My answer will be no. We are ready, but President Kiir himself will be the first person to apologize to who is exposed or imposed to his enemies when they were the same people who put him in the office to be president of South Sudan. Okay. And Buchi Obi, you saying, we don't need cattle colony. It's an insult to build the nonsense in a great Biafra land. Jibril Buhari, take note. All right. So you're writing to us from Biafra land this afternoon. Thank you. And Emmanuel Nyakonda, you're saying Google him. Okay, I'll do that. Thank you. Thank you for that challenge. I'll do that after this. I'll definitely go Google that transport minister that is giving you sleepless nights there in Zimbabwe. I'll do that. Thank you for that information. Yes, and you're saying he was appointed in a different one when he was misfired. Okay. So what? The president fired another one that you thought was doing a great job and brought this one in, or what is happening? I did not get that point very well. But right now, I really want to thank you so much for your company. I've talked. My throat now needs some water. So I think we'll see you here on Sunday. A doctor is supposed to be traveling to South Africa for the inauguration of President Cyril Ramaphosa, which is scheduled to take place tomorrow in South Africa. So we'll see if the show will be on Sunday. He'll be back on time. Then we will have the show, the Africa Showdown on Sunday. But for now, I want to leave you with some clip from some work from before. And I hope to see you here, if not on Sunday, then on Monday. But hopefully on Sunday for the Africa Showdown. And hopefully we'll bring you the latest in what has been happening in Malawi in terms of the elections that happened this week. The official results have not been announced yet. But of course, incumbent President Peter Mutharika has so far received 40% of the votes. And and 75% of the votes have been tallied, so the majority. So I don't think the remaining 25 will change anything. And that is that. And of course, Zimbabweans, some members of the NGOs were arrested and charged. That is something that we will look at. And other developing stories across the continent, we'll take a look at that on Sunday or on Monday. So I want to thank you so much for having kept me company at this lovely Friday. It's a bit chilly and some sunshine here in Nairobi. The weather is not really decided whether it wants to, there's some sunshine or it wants to be cold. And so, yes, we had some light rains yesterday in the evening. And so that... but it's a wonderful day here in Nairobi today. So thank you so much for your company. Thank you so much for contributing to the show. Continue to write to us. And if there's anything else you want us to address, a topic you want us to talk about, always feel free to share your ideas there, and we see how that we can make that happen. Also, thank you so much. I've been Miriam Ogutu. I'll see you again next time. But for now, it is bye-bye.
First of all, let me thank you. I've prepared 2 papers which I believe will be circulated because they'll not be projected. But if you can see, first of all, I want to agree with the Honorable Minister. I've done 2 pictorials. One of them is described as Africa at the dinner table. And if you look at Africa at the dinner table, Africa is on a plate and it is meat. And the diners at the dinner table are France, the United Kingdom, the United States, the European Union, the Chinese, and progressively the Arabs. And my second picture is the African hotspots. It's not visible from there. But if you look at Africa today, and you make a clean sweep with your mind, there are different conflicts of different intensity in Somalia, in northern Mauritania, in northern Mali, in Central African Republic, Democratic Republic of Congo, Guinea-Bissau, in the Cameroons, in South Sudan, and one can go on and on. And there is a sense in which Africa has always been alive to the question of interference. I will refer this audience, particularly those who are starting, to take time and read the 32 odd speeches that were made in the month of May 1963 by the then heads of states and government of independent African states, the 32 of them. And there are 2 speeches that I want to isolate for this presentation. One was by David Dacko of Central African Republic. And in thanking Emperor Haile Selassie and Kwame Nkrumah on that day, he said that we must never forget that the colonial power has not left us. We must recognize that he did not go willingly. And if we don't check them, they'll come back again. And what would little Central African Republic do against them? Today, he is right. Today, if we remember the activities of France and how they propped up the regime of Jean-Bedel Bokassa, he was right. Today, as the Honorable Minister has indicated, Africa remains the only continent in the world that is referred to in these terms, Anglophone, to mean that we are a sphere of our erstwhile colonizers. About 2 weeks ago, there was a meeting of the Commonwealth in London, England. And a friend of mine who is an Anglophile sent me the photograph very gleefully, saying this is a meeting of 53 equal states. I told him, no, If it was so, why is it that the leadership of the Commonwealth is hereditary rather than rotational? In other words, in the minds of the British, her former colonies are still under her tutelage. And I want to submit to us that in the minds of what I'll call the conceptual West, they think they have a divine duty to instruct Africans what to do.
True.
And in the minds of many African leaders, they think that they have a divine duty to accept what they are told. That, in my view, is what the Honorable Minister was talking about, the mindset. And this is something that has been examined. We have seen France and its very pernicious presence in Africa. We know what they did in Burkina Faso against Thomas Sankara. We know what they did in Mali or the Sudan against Modibo Keita or against Sekou Touré in Guinea. Pernicious to the core. The Portuguese, we know what battles had to be fought in that area. And let me put this very bluntly. When the former leader of Portugal, Marcelo Caetano, was asked, why can you not allow the colonies to gain independence? This is what he said in substance. As I have examined world history over the years, the following have emerged. That the Caucasians have been responsible for monumental discoveries in the development of man. So have the Chinese, so have the Arabs. But the Africans have been responsible for nothing. They are only fit as hewers of wood and drawers of water. And I want to submit to you who are present here that in the conceptual West's unguarded moments, that is what they think. And that is how they relate to Africa. So the whole idea that they will interfere is something that they think is their God-given duty. I said there were two speeches in 1963 that I wanted to refer to. I referred to David Dacko. The second one was the speech by Kwame Nkrumah. And Kwame provided the solution. He did not complain about colonialism. He said, we must live here with one army, with one command. We must live here with one currency. We must live here with one currency, one country. I do not know where its capital will be, but I suggest Leopoldville or Bangui. Other leaders may have their thoughts. Kwame was right, but who listened to him? Several years down the line, and I've said it in my paper, there were coup d'etats which were engineered, there were mutinies which were engineered, and other forms of destabilization. And I want to believe that the person who actually said it very well in the 1980s was the former American President Ronald Reagan. He said, the United States of America does what is in her best interest. And I agree with him. Does Africa do what is in her best interest? Do African leaders do what is in the best interest of Africa? Interference will be there in very blatant and brazen ways and in subtle ways. I've always asked, until very recently, how many African countries manufactured bullets? Very few. Until very recently, how many African countries, in fact, how many African countries manufacture jet fighters? How many African countries are involved in the arms industry? Some of the leading conceptual West countries which pontificate to us about prizes, peace prizes, are the leading manufacturers of landmines. And if you look at their foreign exchange earners, it is the military and security items. So they say with their mouths, what do they not believe in their hearts? In Kiswahili we say, vita vya panzi furaha ya kunguru. That when the locusts are fighting, it is the joy of the hawk. Because when they kill each other, they get the food easily, dead. It is in the best interest, I dare submit, without fear of contradiction, that the elite in the conceptual West does not want Africa to stabilize, despite their assertion to the contrary. And you'll see it in every country because conflict is a major industry. Today, you look at South Sudan and the many peace conferences that are being held, but if you ask who supplies the arms, who provides safe havens, it is the conceptual West. And when I use the term conceptual West, I'm saying that it extends to countries which are geographically not in the West, like Australia or Canada. So I'm submitting in answer to your question, Joe, that interference is there, and it is part, to use this old cliche, of the neo-colonial project. The neo-colonial project requires that Africa must remain within the sphere of influence of these states. Today, if you look at the United Kingdom, which has left Europe, one would have thought that those are their cousins and that they should sit in comfort with them. You will now see their involvement being de-emphasized in Europe and their interest and appetite growing towards the Commonwealth. Because in the Commonwealth, they are the major domos. They'll tell us what to do. In Europe, they have to grapple with the Germans and the French, and they don't like it. That is the unspoken bit of it. The French also are in Europe, but the Germans are too strong, and they don't like it. So they want to hold Côte d'Ivoire, Gabon, and tell them what to do. I do not know how many of you saw the press conference that was attended by President Macron of France and Nana Addo of Ghana. And when Nana Addo spoke as an African should, you could see the body language of the French president. How dare this man speak this way? In other words, I'm saying that interference is the mother's milk of European economies. But to answer your second question, they have their own recruits who Professor Philip Nying'oro will be speaking here. To use the old vocabulary of those days, they have the people you call their comprador bourgeoisie. You must remember. The comprador bourgeoisie are Africans with black faces, but essentially they are doing the bidding of these powers. They are the ones you'll find them in different spheres. And they will be present. They are in your cabinet, but they are actually representatives of the foreign intelligence agencies of those countries. We know this. If you look at the declassified papers from the United States, we now know that some of leading cabinet ministers in many African countries were working for the CIA or some Western agencies. So you are sitting in cabinet, and in these days of the mobile phone, they are possibly texting their masters in Europe and America. So interference is also exacerbated by these comprador bourgeois for their own benefits. And it has never changed, Honorable Minister. In the early days of slavery, they gave some of the chiefs mirrors and alcohol. Today, what they give them are flats in Paris or in Dubai. And that is what makes them undermine Africa. The third mode of interference is through institutions. Look at the competition as it is now. There is a new entrant into the market that is called China. China is very subtle. Many people wrote the obituary of Rwanda in 1994. 20 years down the line, it has been demonstrated that Africans can actually do it. Between 1983 and 1987, I think Thomas Sankara in Burkina Faso also demonstrated that it can be done. We saw in Somalia, despite their problem. So my prescription is African unity. Africa must now begin to negotiate initially in terms of blocks, SADC, ECOWAS, East African Community, and ultimately as African Union. And lo and behold, we must do it. And I've always said this cliche, we must do it, because if we don't do it, we will be done. Thank you.